The following program is a production of the Fairfax Network, Fairfax County Public Schools.
Welcome to Community Keynotes, Concussion Protocol. This program was recorded at Annandale High School in Fairfax County, Virginia. Keynote speakers Dr. Catherine McGill and certified athletic trainer Kathy Ayers discuss the issues of concussion injuries while playing high school sports. First, Dr. McGill shares her expertise on the science behind concussions and how research is driving new management strategies.
I have to tell you, I get so excited when I get asked to be part of this group, because if there's two things we can do, or two of the things we can do to keep our kids safer, it's one, act as a team, and two, make sure our team is educated. So when I get to stand here in front of parents and coaches and coach administration and the school and athletic trainers, there's no better team. And that really is the gold standard to keeping youth sports safer. So my role in tonight, as you just heard, is this concussion thing. And I'm gonna guess we've got some football fans in here, and that you probably watch some football on Sundays. And you can't watch a game these days without hearing the word concussion. But I'm also gonna guess that you may not fully understand or appreciate exactly what it is. What is this injury at its core? And then odds are you're also not quite as confident then in how you can manage it. So those are the two things I'm gonna tackle tonight. So what is a concussion? And I'm gonna make this simple. So concussion occurs when you get hit in the head, the neck, or the body. And it really causes that brain on the inside to shake back and forth. You don't actually have to get hit in the head. You could actually get hit in the body that sends that head whipping back and forth. And when you get the concussion, it really impairs the brain function. And you'll know that because you'll start to see some signs and some symptoms, which we're gonna get to in a minute. It's actually unusual to lose consciousness. You know, a few years back, if you went to the doctor for a concussion, they'd say, "Did you black out? Did you lose consciousness?" If you said no, they say, "Oh, you're good, you're good." That's actually not true. We now know from research that less than 10% of children are going to lose consciousness. So we miss 90% of this injury. There are such things, if you do get a concussion or you think somebody has concussion, first thing you need to look for are danger signs. And what I want to point out about this is danger signs are actually a sign that something other than concussion is going on. It means the brain may be bleeding or swelling, and these are extremely rare. And yet, although they're extremely rare, they're always what makes the media. Signs are things you may observe. So if Johnny comes to you with concussion, he may look dazed, he may be answering questions more slowly, and symptoms are what the child may report to you. And again, all these are super important. I'm going to give you some tricks to remember these later on, but just to review, these symptoms may be cognitive, they could be physical, like headaches, emotional. Everybody's sitting here going, I have a teenager, they're all cranky, what's the difference, right? This is a change from their normal functioning, and certainly some sleep-related things. But this is what a concussion really looks like. We're gonna have to use your imagination a little bit, it's not loading. But basically you see the brain and it's floating in some space. And if I click this, if it worked, you would actually see that brain shaking inside the skull and stretching. And that's really what starts a concussion, okay? Concussion is actually a neurochemical change. It's not bruising, it's not bleeding, and it's not swelling. It's a chemical change, and that's temporary. And it's kind of good that it's a chemical change, because that means the structures are not damaged. And that means the impairment is usually temporary. So if you ever come to my clinic, you'll hear me say concussions are like snow globes. And what I mean by that is it's a neurochemical change. It's almost like you took the brain and you shook it up, just like a snow globe. And all those little neurochemicals are doing stuff. They're floating around in ways they shouldn't. And if you just set that snow globe down, if you do the right things, things will come back on track. Kids do get better. But when the neurochemical change happens, it wipes out the body's energy system. So concussion actually is a change in the body's energy system. That's really it at its core. And when you have low battery, low energy, you get symptoms. So that's what symptoms are from concussion. We cannot prevent all concussions, but what we can do is to prevent more serious injuries from occurring. And one of the ways we can do that are through programs like you're going to view tonight, the USA Football Program. It's how do we reduce the risk? How do we pay attention to what our kids are doing? And how do we pay attention in a way that we're going to recognize those injuries when they do occur more quickly, more accurately? And that's what I get at when I say that's a team sport right there in of itself. That takes athletic trainers and coaches and parents and their peers on the team. We can also take action steps to prevent the prolonged recovery. So we can learn to manage this injury better. We can be prepared to do that. And we can support that student, not just at home, but academically and socially, emotionally. Here's what we do know. So far, there's no magic number of concussions. It is not 3 strikes, you're out. For some kids, 3 concussions is way too many. In other kids, it's not. I actually just had a kid recently who's on his 7th concussion, and he's actually fine. I don't want him to keep getting more, but he's actually fine. Nearly all children recover from this injury. And prolonged recovery, when it does start to take weeks, months, or longer, that's usually due to a variety of reasons. Things that started with the concussion, but maybe they're not being maintained. Maybe there's a lot of stress involved that's maintaining symptoms now and so forth. And all those things have to be addressed before that kid goes back to their normal self. But here's where we need a lot more research. What products and tests help lessen or help us assess this injury? If you Google the word concussion, all these products come up, right? But none of them are going to have been shown through research, at least yet, to reduce the likelihood your child's going to sustain a concussion. No helmet, no mouth guard, none of that. We also need to learn the difference between boys and girls. We have research in our clinic that shows boys and girls, when they're not injured, they complain of the symptoms about equally. But when you injure them, girls have a lot higher symptoms than boys do. We need to figure that out. Why some children take longer. My favorite story with this is I had twin boys in football, and they collided with one another in practice, and they knocked each other out. A little bit of sibling rivalry. One twin got better in a few days, and the other one took several weeks. I can't explain that scientifically. We need more research on that. And last, there's a lot of information in the media about chronic traumatic encephalopathy. This is CTE. This is what you hear about the NFL players who are involved in lawsuit. While this is a very, it's a very serious concept that we need a lot more research on, it has not been linked to repeated head injuries in children. That is not the case. And we're not even sure if this exists in people who don't take repeated head injuries. So we have a lot more work to do in regard to that. So let's talk about how to recognize and respond to this injury. I'm going to ask, out of everything tonight, you remember 2 things. Pretty simple. 1, a concussion is a head or blow to the neck or body. And 2, it causes a change in function. Okay? That's it. If you see a hit and you see a change in function, you're going to say, I suspect. Not, I diagnose. Not, I'm sure my kid is, completely concussed forever. No, this is, I suspect my child may have a concussion, or my player may. And so I'm going to do the right thing and just pull them out of play till we get checked by a healthcare provider. And then you can look for any of those changes in symptoms, the physical, the cognitive, emotional, or sleep. It takes both those things put together. Because I'm sure we could go around the room and I'll talk about reasons for headaches, or reasons why our concentration's off, right? It's not just a concussion headache. Headaches happen for lots of reasons. So you're really looking for those 2 things. So if your child or athlete does display those 2 things and you suspect, remember those danger signs I showed you earlier, you're going to think back on those. And if you see them, you're kind of done thinking about concussion, you're going to go straight to the emergency department or call 911. Because again, that may be a signal something more serious is going on. But chances are that's rare. So chances are you really just need to notify your pediatrician. And that's when maybe Johnny has a few signs or a few symptoms, and you're just going to give them a call and say, hey, I think they may have concussion. Can we come get checked out? And you actually don't need to wake them up every 2 hours. Letting them sleep is a great thing. In fact, it can help speed up recovery. But what you do want to do is make sure they can be aroused easily. So maybe kind of nudge them and make sure that they're willing to complain that you keep waking them up. If headaches continue beyond a few days or a couple weeks, seeing a neurologist is helpful, and then coming to a specialty clinic such as ours at Children's National is really helpful. If your child has had a history of multiple concussions, symptoms really aren't going away quickly, we need help getting back into school, or if we're not sure when they should return to sports, especially if they don't have a good athletic trainer at their school. Here are a few quick tools I'd like to point out. Dr. Mike Evans is somebody who we worked with out of Canada, and he's a wonderful doctor who can just make an injury come to life, per se. And he is got 2 YouTube videos, Concussion 101 and Return to Learn. And they're very kid-friendly, they're user-friendly. I'd encourage all of you, if you're not familiar with these, to check them out. But there's also a few websites here that are quite helpful, including USA Football's and ours at Children's National. And resources can be located on all of these websites. Other great concussion education and awareness tools, the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, and all of these are available to you for free to download. And they have packets and heads-up toolkits for parents and coaches. They have online concussion course training. materials for the schools, healthcare providers, including another video. How many of you have a smartphone? Okay, just about everybody. So here's another tool I'm going to ask you to download so you have it in your pocket. It's fantastic that you're coming out tonight and listening to us, but chances are you're not going to remember every single little thing I'm saying, especially maybe not a year from now when you actually need it. So you can download this app, which we helped to create, Concussion Recognition Response. It's free. And what it does is when you think you may suspect an injury, you pull it out and you hit new incident and it walks you through exactly what you need to be asking. There's no one magic symptom for concussion, so you got to remember them all. But you want to make sure you're being thorough, and this is one way to do that. So you would go through and say, yep, the kid threw up, nope, he doesn't have any of these other problems, and as you get to the end, it'll tell you whether or not concussion is suspected. And if it is, it tells you exactly what you need to do next, and you can hit the little email button up top, and it can shoot, if you're a coach, the report to the parent, it can shoot it to the doctor, and then it goes up to a cloud in an anonymous way because we like to do research to figure out how to get these kids better faster. So now I'd like to spend just a couple minutes on management. There really is a new wave of management for concussion. Historically, we talked a lot about rest, go sleep. We call it the black box. And while that's good up front, maybe for the first couple days, it's really not where things are heading now. So number one, please don't take any more hits to the head. We want these kids pulled out away from danger so they can begin to heal right off the bat. The kids who take the longest to recover are those who take subsequent hits before that first one's healed. That can be when we can get to some more of the scary consequences too from concussion. As I just said initially, resting that brain for a couple days and a good night's sleep is excellent. That really can also help speed up the recovery in the long run. But then we want to switch gears. And the whole mentality of not too much, not too little. I don't want you to be a couch potato. I want you to get up and get moving, but I'm not ready for you to go back full steam. I'm not ready for you to go back to practice, or maybe you're not even going to a full day at school. But can we start exercising a little bit? Can you get on that stationary bike for 5 minutes? Can you go for a walk for 10 minutes? I joke in my clinic, if you have a dog, you're the official dog walker. In school, can we go back for 2 hours? Can we try 30 minutes of homework? So we need to find that balance. And we need to find that balance across their physical activities, their cognitive and academic demands, and their stress level. There's a lot of great research that shows that activity is good. This is not specific to concussion, but I found this the other day and I really wanted to throw it up here. All of us, when we exercise, would benefit in these such ways, but certainly concussion kids are no different. It will improve their mood. It helps them feel that they're getting better. It's something they can do and control versus just sitting there waiting to get better. This is a sample of returning to school accommodations. This is a form that we developed and use in our clinic, but I just want to highlight a few things that you might consider if your child has sustained a concussion. This type of guidance is also in that app that I showed you. If you email it to yourself or to the doctor or to the parent from the coach to the parent, it automatically attaches itself to give you initial guidance. When the child is able to tolerate about 30 minutes, we say, maybe it's 30 minutes of homework or reading or flipping through a magazine. If they can tolerate 30 minutes without their symptoms getting too much worse, then we're ready to start to go back to school gradually. So maybe we're going for shortened days, or maybe shortened classes. Maybe you're at a full day or half a day, but taking a rest break in the nurse's office. Always usually get extended time to complete coursework, and reducing that homework can be essential. And finally, no testing, and that's for a couple reasons. Spending a lot of time at night studying isn't always a great idea, and also their brain's not working well. It's not going to be their best performance. And lastly, for final medical clearance, I just want to mention this before I will turn over to our great athletic trainers who will go more into gradual return to play. But from my standpoint, I will start to think about clearance for a child when they're symptom-free at rest and with a decent level of non-contact activity, when they're able to attend school fully without use of those accommodations. Their neuropsychological testing has returned to normal, or at least their ability to take tests and quizzes and complete homework has returned to normal. We don't want them doing any contact sports, not even 5 minutes in a game. I often hear that. Can they play just 5 minutes? No. Concussions happen in less than 5 minutes, I assure you. No contact activity or sports until symptom-free, but again, we're getting them active along the way. And once they are symptom-free, we'll kick it over to the athletic trainer for a gradual return to play protocol. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dr. McGill.
We now take a brief break to look at Heads Up Football, a national program designed to promote player safety and reduce concussions.
As teams take to the field, student athletes will be playing Heads Up Football.
Heads Up Football, endorsed by football leagues across the country, offers education and certification in 4 key areas of player safety: heat and hydration, heads-up tackling, concussion recognition and awareness, and equipment fitting.
The only thing that's really changed in terms of adopting the USA Football and Heads Up program has been our language and making sure that we're falling in line and using the same language. So as kids come up through the USA Football Certified Youth Program, that they've heard different ways to buzz their feet, shoot their hands. We're just trying to have this in common language so kids understand a safe way in order to hit and have contact.
Break down.
Coaches at this school district learn the same heads-up techniques as student athletes. They also share information with parents on how student players can keep their heads up and out of a tackle. Training, practice, and a well-fitting helmet are crucial to any team that plays heads up.
I look to see where it fits on his head initially. Feel the air going in?
Yeah.
So we're checking to make sure the bladders are holding air and it's good and snug around the head.
We follow the state law that mandates that both parent and athlete be educated on concussion and what the signs and symptoms are. Once they get ready to go on the field, we fit our football players with their helmets, make sure they have a good fit, make sure they're safe on the field. And then we also do impact baselines. Impact is a neurocognitive test that we use to assess the severity of a concussion, and we can match it to their baseline to see what their norm is, so it makes sure that they don't get back on the field before they're safe.
Heads Up Football remains a contact sport, and using your brains when it really counts never hurts.
We now return to the presentation with certified athletic trainer Kathy Ayers, discussing the stages a student athlete must go through before returning to play after a concussion.
What we're going to do with return to play, the first part of this is something that starts only when there's no doubt that that athlete had no symptoms at rest for at least 24 hours. But rest is a very open-ended word, as you heard Dr. McGill talk about, because return to play protocol, one of the things that I say is it doesn't start till that child has made it through an entire day of school without the accommodations. Because everybody gets very confused on return to play. There's a difference of return to learning and the ready to learn, and then return to play. And in the return to play, they're symptom-free after that full day of school with cognitive exertion. The progression begins. As we already talked about, we like to get our kids active during the progression when their symptoms is what we use here at high school is kind of stabilized. They're not getting any worse with school. They might still have a headache. They might have some issues, but we're going to try in a controlled setting, putting them on a stationary bike for 5 minutes to give them some exercise. We might have them walk around the track at practice. And I say controlled setting because depending on the age of the child, what the symptoms are, we use walking the dog. But I may say that you need to take somebody with you to walk the dog, just so that if anything occurs or your symptoms get worse for the first time or two, you have somebody with you. We don't put them on a bike to go ride the neighborhood because that's not really a controlled setting. They don't have the opportunity and when their headache gets worse to say, "Oh, I'm done." That's a problem if they're out in the neighborhood. If they're on a stationary bike, they say their headache's getting worse, we can stop. Time to get off, let's take a break, see what happens to your symptoms. So that's where that moderate intensity. There is absolutely no contact activities. And this is probably the hardest one to understand. And even my high school kids don't understand. Return to play progression is only going to start when those symptoms are done. And it's a staged process. There is no set number of days. And that's probably the biggest thing as parents. You go and read stuff and you look on the internet and you say it's 5 stages, it's 5 days. No, that's not how this works. It's 5 stages successfully completed without symptoms. At any time, we could get held in a stage because symptoms might come up or we might need to backtrack. So our stage 1 is they've made it through that full day of school without any issues. They've been maybe walking the dog every day, they're not having any symptoms, that headache's resolved, that inability to focus has resolved, the light sensitivity has now resolved. So we're going to start with some non-contact, very moderate activity, 15 to 20 minutes, could be stationary biking, could be a treadmill if that's available, but I usually say this is in a controlled setting so that at any point, because we're just in that initial phase, if their headache comes back or they start to feel lightheaded, then we stop. And that means we're still at stage 1. And I will tell you that with our athletes, boys and girls, football, basketball, volleyball, whatever the sport, we tend to spend more than 1 day in stage 1. It sometimes takes us a couple days to get through stage 1. Stage 1 isn't complete until you can do that 15 to 20 minutes without the symptoms. And if you get, kids like to say, well, I got a headache, let me stop for 5 minutes. Oh, it's all gone, let me get back on. Okay, well that's great, but you're still stuck in this stage because we haven't gotten to a good 20 minutes in a chunk. It's not 20 minutes total. So that's one of the understandings. You can be in a stage longer than a day. That's why they're stages, not days. As you move to stage 2, now we're getting into some general conditioning, sport-specific skill work, all individually. So if they're a football player, this is done on the side. They're not in the drills of the team. Still non-contact. Sport-specific warm-up, a lot of times, depending what the team does for warm-ups, if they're doing some agility things that are all individualized, they might do some dynamic stretching. That would fit into the sport-specific warm-up. Duration of the workout is 20 to 30 minutes now. You can see we're starting to build that intensity to make it to a practice time. Skill work can occur, so footwork, the running drills, running patterns, cones and dummies. This is done without any pads on. We don't have a helmet on, we don't have shoulder pads on. We just have our jersey and our shorts and we're up in the intensity. Because one of the things is, as soon as you put the helmet on the kid, what is going to be the first words out of your son or daughter's mouth? I'm ready to play. I have my pads on. I have my helmet on. Now, this is non-helmet, but we're still getting them back into the sport, catching and throwing on the side. Stationary means we're not running around. We're not in the actual drills of the team who's in full pads because we don't want to run the risk of going up against somebody or tripping and falling on somebody. This is done on the side, or if they're doing stuff before they put their pads on, conditioning type of activities. Now, made it through stage 1 and 2, there's no symptoms occurring. We're going to our stage 3. Here in stage 3, we're still at no contact, so that means they're not in any of the contact drills. Maybe we're going to put a helmet on them just to get used to the weight of it, see how that helmet feels on their head. Continuing with the general conditioning, now you're up to an hour. So now you're probably at what a normal practice is. Practices may be longer, but you're at a good chunk of an hour of conditioning. Some interval training. Drills with a partner. Partner meaning you can be running, doing footwork with them. You could be shadowing them, but you're not having contact. Walkthroughs on offense and defense. This is strictly lining up, knowing where to be. It's not having contact with a pad. It's not having any of that. But here they've put their helmet on, they're starting to move around. They're doing really well in this. Made it through this stage. Now's when we start getting to what are we going to be doing? Well, your stage 4 is extremely limited contact. And I write that because you're not playing in live scrimmages. This is what I call controlled contact. This is when my team is doing drills. They're doing things that are controlled. This is not the one-on-one, take them down to the ground drill. This is alignment. This is maybe we're hitting some pads. We're going up against something that's not going to fight back as much. So it's more of controlled contact. We now have those pads on. We're getting regular conditioning and duration of practice. Duration of practice is probably the biggest one because a lot of times your son or daughter can only do X part of practice. Well, they still need to be conditioning or running around, doing some exercise for the length of time of what practice would be so that they get used to it. Because if they only do the first 30 minutes and then all they do is stand there, they haven't worked on that progression of getting back into that activity. You don't want to take them from the 30 minutes activity today with limited contact to going to the full 2 hours of practice. So it's really important. Continuing walkthroughs, they're doing some skill work, catching and throwing while running, moving, handoffs. They can review blocking and tackling techniques using the USA Football heads-up football techniques, focusing on the skill. So these are things that can be done against the dummies, working on the proper techniques. Big thing here is this is where coaches need to review technique. How is that child tackling? Are they keeping their head up? What was the initial cause of the injury? As we talked about with concussions, everybody's different. Everybody can take 1 day, 2 days. You might get to stage 4, and now they have a headache. because now we've put all the equipment back on and it's a lot more intense. What's that mean? It means you got to go back to stage 3 for a day. Make sure there's no symptoms, then come back to stage 4. And it's really important that your child understands the importance of recognizing those symptoms. Because what the kids don't get, especially as they get older, is that if they get that second impact and haven't healed from the first impact, that's going to be a lot more of an issue. And they have to be honest the whole way through. Now, one of the tools in our toolbox is we use balance testing and different balance challenges to see if their balance is normal. We do different types of questions, so it's not just straight up, do you have a headache? I can have a young man tell me he doesn't have a headache. We start progressing through a conversation, and all of a sudden, well, yeah, I had a headache in math today. Well, is that normal? Or is that just you did have a headache, but now it's gone kind of scenario? So it's important that you're having conversations, meaningful conversation, more than just how you feel today. What was your day like? What was practice like? What was happening at practice? And then the stage 5, this is the big important thing. This is full team practice with body contact. But the key word in that entire sentence is practice. They have to practice before going back to a game. And at youth level, that may be hard given practice schedules, but they practice a lot more than they used to when I was young. They need to go to a practice. Why a practice? Because practice is controlled. Practice is if I'm having a problem, my coach is going to be able to be standing right next to us and be like, whoa, that kid's not running the right play. Why don't they know the route now? What's going on? If it's in a game, things can happen. Adrenaline's running. You don't want to come out of the game. So it's important they return to a practice. And to be honest, this occurs with any injury. No child should be going from a no practice with an injury to a game without having put a full practice under their belt. Whether it be concussion, sprained ankle, whatever it is. They need to return to the ability and practices of their teammates prior to a game so they're up to speed. They're ready to go. Full practice is completed with no symptoms. You're ready to return to competition if medically cleared. Big part of this is return to play progression occurs when that medical clearance has occurred, that the symptoms are resolved, their neurotesting is back to within normal limits, and they're ready for that next stage. I think the snow globe is a great example. The other thing we use as an example for a concussion, it's like hitting the restart on your computer multiple times and never getting a chance for it to actually start. And that's what your brain's doing. It's trying to restart, trying to get those connections. And it's just constantly hitting the restart button until finally it kicks in. But there is no set time. No hit determines the severity of the concussion, in all honesty. Minor hits can look like a minor hit to all of us. We can review the film, it was a minor hit. This concussion could take 4 weeks to resolve because that child's brain is just different and responds differently. This big hit looks like you should have a concussion. That child tests through all the concussion protocols with no problem. Just the way it is. Because it's the shaking of the brain in the skull, no hit actually determines how severe it is. It just depends on that individual's brain and how much it was shook and what the neurotransmitters are doing. And that's probably the hardest thing for young athletes to understand, whether it be in youth or high school. Because Johnny here had a concussion and was back in 10 days. Jack has a concussion and he's got a month and he still has problems. Jack's hit didn't look as bad as Johnny's hit. That's not what this is about. This is about the actual brain and how the brain functions. And I think that's the part of the research they're really working on to try to see what's going on and what's making those differences. The research is coming, but it's not here yet.
This has been Community Keynotes, Concussion Protocol, recorded at Annandale High School in Fairfax County, Virginia. If you would like to know more about the Community Keynotes series, please visit the Fairfax Network website at www.fcps.edu/Fairfax Network.